My name is Christa Nunez, and I run the Learning Farm here in Ithaca. And I would love to share my ideas about human breath and how the climate crisis, how the COVID-19 crisis, as well as systemic racism, violent and oppressive policing, and a myriad other things are converging at this moment to affect human breath, especially with regard to systemically urbanized populations and people who have been forced into unhealthy, food insecure, food desert, food apartheid, food segregation areas, and how land access or lack of land access has impacted populations of color at this moment, and how it's all converging right now to create a really deeply challenging and disturbing situation for people of color. With regard to the family history, so my family, I am descendant of enslaved people in this country. And prior to that, a big portion of my family came from Africa and West Africa, and were farmers based on the historical record that I've been able to uncover. They were farmers, and then came to this country, and the relationship to land has been mainly exploitative and sort of displacement based, and then after slavery ended and Reconstruction happened, my family, both sides of my family, ended up moving from Mississippi and Virginia up north, and working in steel mills and carving out a little place in urban areas outside of Chicago and outside of St. Louis. And then subsequently, a portion of my family experienced the East St. Louis race riots and were further displaced from land and business. And so I'm the first of my family in this current, group of generations to want to be reconnected with land, and farming and enjoying raising my children in a natural and farm environment has really allowed me to see how important it is for people to have space, for people to be able to have the opportunity to grow their own food, and then when COVID hit, it really made me realize how important it is for people to be able to be safely distanced from one another and still be able to go outside and enjoy life, and still be able to have a couple people over and be outside, and and not be having to be forced into situations where, and I used to live in New York City, and seeing pictures of people, on crowded subways, and people not having any unconcreted areas in which to play or relax or walk, really just told me, like, my family is an example of how separation from land can really deeply affect us as crises begin to happen, and as we talk about climate crises and climate refugees, and as poor people and people of color are forced out of areas in sort of a compounding fashion. I think that we have to be thinking as a community about how we can reconnect people who have been separated generationally from land, and reconnect them with ways to obtain healthy living situations. And so Quarter Acre for the People came about because I realized what I have, I want to replicate for other people, and I only have it because of hard work, but also a lot of help, a lot of cooperation with people, a lot of just family networking and a lot of partnership with my husband and a lot of um, pooling of funds, and I think that the more we do that, the more that my family is helped, this family could be helped. Anybody that wants to grow food and live healthfully on a piece of land should be able to do so. And so that's why we started Quarter Acres, because I care about the people who I understand as being my own, especially with regard to a shared experience. If you're poor, if folks don't think that you could pay back a mortgage and you don't have access to the type of finance that's required to purchase land, if you find yourself scrambling for childcare and having to ride a bus to work, and feeling insecure about where your next meal is going to come from, you are my people. That's where I came from. And so if I get to live on land, you should be able to live on land. And the efforts that I've been making toward connecting to landowners and farmers and people who have been recipients of a beautiful, great bounty of land ownership and generational support around farming, and who really want to do what's right and feel compelled to share what they have. I feel like there is enough of that type of heart to support a lot of people who do want to change the circumstance and who are willing to step out on faith and try something new. And I think the more we educate people around the history of things, I think sometimes growing up, I remember feeling like there was something wrong with us because we were poor or we did something wrong. Like, why didn't we have what everybody else had? All my friends had cabins in the upper part of Michigan, and we would go on vacation. It's like, why don't we have that? And it was like that sort of shame of poverty. But as an adult, having done the research, it's like, now we know that there's a such thing as redlining. And I recall my grandfather telling stories about wanting to take advantage of the GI Bill when he got back from Europe, having fought in World War II, and how they were like, you don't get to take advantage of the GI Bill, that's not for you. And how all those things, and how the GI Bill supported so many families in land ownership and home ownership, and how just giant populations of the United States and populations of people of color were excluded from that. And so connecting the dots of like where wealth comes from helps me understand there's no shame in where I came from, or not having as much money as other people have, because there are systems in place that made sure that I didn't have the same experience as other friends of mine. And so understanding that helps me understand that there are people today that are experiencing the impacts of redlining, of systemic housing and food oppression, and who are still today, over 100 years after the abolishment of slavery, and are still wanting to experience the American dream. And I think that today is the day, especially as we look at COVID-19 and how terrible the consequences of what we've done in this country can be, that today is the day that we need to figure these solutions out and connect people with what is rightfully theirs. The Quarter Acre for the People project is about connecting people who have been systemically urbanized, people who are living in urban situations, who might be experiencing food or housing insecurity, and who want to live on land, with folks who have land and want to provide access to people with the lands that they hold. It's about garden education, it's about farming cooperation, and it's about land access and helping families to access the bounty and the beauty of land and gardening access. So the pandemic helped me to understand the urgency around launching Quarter Acre for the People, seeing and hearing people dying at much higher rates than other populations simply because of lack of access to healthy food, lack of access to health care, lack of access to open spaces in which to breathe freely, lack of access to jobs that would protect them from contracting COVID-19, and seeing how a small project like this can really go a long way in changing people's lives, and understand that there's a community will around it, and hearing a lot of indigenous, white, black, refugee voices coming to the table saying that these types of programs need to happen really energized me and helped me want to make it happen quickly, because the consequences became much more dire than even they were before.